My name is Julia Anderson, and on the day my parents forced me into that mahogany-lined conference room, I realized that sometimes the deepest cuts do not come from strangers, but from the people who raised you. I was 29 years old, a licensed accountant, someone who had clawed her way up every rung of the ladder without help. And yet in that suffocating room, I was reduced again to the powerless child they had always trained me to be. The air smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, and the realtor in her bright red blazer sat at the far end like a vulture papers already stacked pin ready. My mother's hand rested tightly on my younger sister Vanessa's shoulder, as if presenting her to a jury, while my father's eyes locked on me with the cold intensity of a judge about to pass sentence. I had inherited Grandma Margaret's house, a home worth nearly $800,000 in Seattle's Capitol Hill, but to my parents, it was never mine. To them, it was just another asset to be redirected into Vanessa's hands. They leaned across the table, their voices rising above the lawyer's calm attempts at order. "Sign it now, Julia," my father barked, slamming his palm so hard the stack of papers jumped. "Sign it over to your sister, or you are no longer part of this family." The words were not a threat delivered in anger, but a decree spoken as if I had no agency, no voice, no right to decide what was mine. My mother added in her sharp whisper, "Family means sharing. Vanessa needs this house more than you. Don't be selfish." Vanessa dabbed her eyes with a tissue at the perfect moment her performance honed from years of getting everything she wanted. "Julia, please," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound pitiful. "You already live in a studio. You don't need something so big. Let me build my future here." It would have been laughable if it wasn't so cruel. The house was my future, my one chance at stability after decades of scraping. I looked at the pen lying across the dotted line, and for a moment, my hand actually shook. Not from temptation, but from fury I had learned to bury. Because in the Anderson household, rage was punished, resistance was crushed, and silence was survival. But survival was no longer enough. As my father loomed closer and hissed, "Stop being difficult. Sign or you're nothing to us." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I slid my hand down, shielding the screen from their eyes, and there it was, a message from Michael Grant. All documents recorded, waiting outside. My lips curled into a smile so faint they mistook it for surrender. They thought they had me cornered, but what they never understood was that I had already learned from the best teacher, Grandma Margaret, that power isn't about shouting louder. It is about moving earlier, playing the piece before anyone else knows the board has shifted. My heart pounded as I rose from my chair. "Before I sign anything," I said, letting my voice cut through the room, "there's someone you need to meet." Growing up in the Anderson household taught me a lesson that most children never have to learn. Love was not unconditional, it was currency, and in our family, it was traded almost exclusively for the benefit of my younger sister Vanessa. I was the firstborn, the one who should have had the advantage, but from the earliest memories, I can recall that advantage was stripped from me piece by piece, while Vanessa was elevated like some golden idol. When I was 7 years old, I remember begging my parents to come see me receive an award at the school science fair. I had spent weeks perfecting my volcano model with baking soda and vinegar, carefully writing up the hypothesis and results on poster board. My father barely looked up from the newspaper when I told him about it. My mother waved a hand and said, "That's nice, Julia, but Vanessa has her dance recital the same night." Of course, they chose Vanessa's recital. I stood on that stage alone, clutching my little ribbon, scanning the crowd for a familiar face that never came. The auditorium echoed with other children's families cheering, while I forced my smile to stay in place so the teacher wouldn't ask questions. When I was 9, Vanessa decided she wanted to take ballet lessons. Immediately, my parents signed her up at the most prestigious studio in the city, bought her brand new slippers and leotards, and drove her to practice 4 times a week. When I asked if I could join the debate club that had a $200 participation fee, my father said flatly, "We need to prioritize. Vanessa's training is an investment. Your debating isn't going to pay the bills." 2 days later, I saw the new silver MacBook they bought for Vanessa to help her with her creative projects. I had to finish my essays on a library computer that crashed every other session. At 12 years old, I learned how to cook basic meals because my parents would leave me at home with instructions to make dinner while they ferried Vanessa from rehearsal to rehearsal. Julia's so independent my mother would brag to her friends. She doesn't need us the way Vanessa does. But I heard the truth underneath those words. Independent meant invisible. Independent meant unworthy of investment. Independent meant you don't matter. The cruelty wasn't just neglect. There were times my father's hand came down across my cheek if I dared argue about fairness. Once, when I was 13, I asked why Vanessa got a new violin tutor while I had to drop my art class because of budget issues. His face turned red. He shoved me against the counter and snarled, "Stop being jealous. Stop being ungrateful. You are stronger than her. You don't need extras." The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, as if gaslighting me into believing my bruised shoulder was just my imagination. It was always like that minimization dismissal, the constant drumbeat that I should endure because I was the resilient one. But resilience without recognition is not a gift. It's a cage. The only person who ever saw me clearly was Grandma Margaret. She lived in that house on Capitol Hill with its ivy-covered porch and the smell of roses drifting through the summer air. Whenever my parents forgot about me, which was often, she would step in. She would show up at my room with warm cookies and ask about the robotics club project I was building. She would listen as I read aloud my essays, nodding with real pride in her eyes. I remember one night I was 16, crying in her kitchen after my parents skipped my National Honor Society induction to attend Vanessa's dance competition. I asked her the question that had been carving a hole inside me for years. Why do they love her more? Grandma pulled me into her arms, her lavender perfume wrapping around me like a shield. They don't love her more, sweetheart. They love themselves more. Vanessa reflects the version of themselves they want the world to see artistic, glamorous, special. You, Julia, reflect the truth of who they are, hardworking, practical, unadorned. And that terrifies them. Her words sank deep into my bones. From that day on, I stopped hoping for my parents' applause. I started focusing on building a life that would not require their approval. But even when you decide to stop caring, the scars remain. My 18th birthday was a perfect example. I had quietly hoped just for once they might surprise me with something meaningful. Instead, they threw a massive Sweet 16-style party for Vanessa because she had just been accepted into a private arts program. My celebration was a perfunctory cake on the kitchen counter with my name spelled wrong in frosting. "We're just so busy with Vanessa's preparations," Mom said apologetically, as if that excused the absence of love. When it came time for college, I knew there would be no help. I worked 3 jobs to pay my way through state school bartending, tutoring, and shelving books at the library, while Vanessa floated from one major to another on my parents' dime. 6 changes in 4 years, no accountability. They called it finding herself. When I graduated magna cum laude with my accounting degree, my parents sent a one-line text, "Congratulations." When Vanessa finally graduated 2 years late, they rented out a banquet hall and hired a photographer. The invitation called it a celebration of our shining star's journey. The double standard was so blatant it almost felt like parody. Yet through it all, Grandma Margaret remained my anchor. She was at my CPA licensing ceremony when my parents went to Cabo for Vanessa's engagement to a man she had known for 3 months. She kept a folder of my college papers and framed my first business card. She reminded me constantly, "You're building something real, Julia. They may never see it, but I do." That belief kept me alive when the weight of their favoritism threatened to crush me. It also planted the seed of defiance. Because Grandma not only loved me, she prepared me. She taught me that family favoritism was a disease, and survival meant inoculating yourself against it. Every slap of neglect, every bruise of dismissal, every instance of gaslighting hardened me into someone who could endure. And endurance, she told me, is the foundation of strategy. By the time I reached my late 20s, I no longer dreamed of reconciliation. I dreamed of independence. But independence required more than grit. It required opportunity. And when Grandma passed away and the lawyer read her will naming me the sole beneficiary of her Capitol Hill house, I knew the opportunity had arrived. What I did not yet know was just how far my parents and Vanessa would go to steal it from me, or how prepared I would have to be to finally fight back with every lesson Grandma had armed me with. The house on Capitol Hill was not just real estate. It was a living monument to the only person who had ever believed in me without condition. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a wraparound porch where ivy climbed like it had secrets of its own, and a garden that bloomed no matter how cruel the Seattle rain could be. To the market, it was worth close to $800,000, a coveted property in a neighborhood where tech executives fought bidding wars over homes half as charming. To me, it was worth everything because every corner carried the fingerprints of Grandma Margaret. The kitchen where she taught me how to bake her apple pie, the porch swing where we sat sipping tea and she told me stories about resilience, the upstairs bedroom that always smelled faintly of lavender from her sachets tucked into the drawers. It was not just square footage, it was proof that I had once been seen, valued, and loved. When the will was read, the attorney's voice was steady, but my heart raced so hard I thought it might crack. The property located at 427 Maple Street shall be inherited solely by my granddaughter, Julia Anderson. Solely. That word detonated inside my chest. Not shared, not split, not contingent. Solely mine. For a fleeting second, I imagined my life changing no more. Rent in a mold-infested studio. No more hour-long commutes from a cheap apartment across town. Living at Maple Street meant I could cut my commute to 5 minutes, save nearly $2,000 a month, finally have a home office where I could take on consulting clients and grow beyond just surviving. It meant stability. It meant freedom. But that fleeting second collapsed as quickly as it appeared because I knew my parents. I knew Vanessa. In the Anderson family, what was mine had always been considered negotiable. The moment they heard the news, they would pounce. I could already picture Vanessa crying about how unfair it was that I got a free house while she had to struggle in her luxury apartment paid for by my parents. I could already hear my mother's sharp voice insisting family shares Julia. Don't be selfish. I could already see my father's cold eyes narrowing as he barked. Do the right thing or you are no daughter of mine. The inheritance was not just a gift, it was a battleground, and I was standing on the front line. Still, when I first unlocked that door and stepped inside for a brief moment, the war faded. Dust motes floated in the slanted light through the bay windows. The wooden floors creaked the same way they had when I was a child. The garden outside shimmered with roses defiant against the late spring chill. I walked room to room touching the furniture, remembering the laughter, the comfort, the nights of whispered reassurance. The house whispered back to me that I was not imagining my worth. I had a right to this space. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. But reality intruded within days. My mother called her voice dripping with false sweetness. Julia, honey, that house is a big responsibility, maybe too big for one person. Have you thought about selling? Vanessa and her new boyfriend are ready to start a life together, and they could really use a place like that. My father followed with his version of concern. You know maintaining a house in that area is expensive. Better to sell now and split the money. Be fair, Julia. Then Vanessa herself called, voice trembling with well-practiced tears. I'm not saying you should give it to me, but maybe we could share, or you could sell it and we could split the proceeds. I mean, you already have a place to live, right? A place to live. She meant my studio with black mold on the ceiling and a landlord who treated hot water like a luxury. The calls came day and night, relentless, each one framing me as greedy, selfish, ungrateful, each one ignoring the fact that the only reason Grandma left the house to me alone was because she knew exactly how this would play out. She knew they would try to take it, and she armed me with something they could not manipulate, a deed with only my name. But paper is only as strong as the person who holds it. And as the pressure mounted, I realized the house was not just a sanctuary. It was a test. Could I finally stand up to decades of favoritism, gaslighting, and coercion? Could I protect what was mine against the family who had always demanded everything and given nothing? Standing in the garden one evening, the scent of roses mixing with the cool air, I whispered aloud as if Grandma could hear me. They're going to come for this house, but I won't let them. Not this time. The wind rustled the leaves like an answer, and I clenched my fists. This inheritance was not just about property. It was about survival, dignity, and finally seizing the justice that had been denied to me my whole life. The pressure began the morning after the will was read, and it did not stop for weeks. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with the first message from my mother. Family means sharing Julia. Don't be selfish. At 7, another from my father. Vanessa is starting her new life. She needs this more than you. By 8, Vanessa herself was sobbing into the receiver. It isn't fair that you got a free house while I have to struggle. Struggle, I thought bitterly, in her luxury apartment with hardwood floors and a view of Lake Union, all paid for by my parents. By noon, Aunt Susan chimed in on Facebook Messenger. Think about what's best for everyone, not just yourself. By dinner, Uncle David left a voicemail about how family unity is more important than property. It was obvious they had all been fed the same script. For 2 straight weeks, the messages hammered at me from dawn until midnight. My phone became a weapon against my sanity, each vibration a reminder that I was the designated scapegoat expected to sacrifice again. The words blurred together: selfish, greedy, ungrateful. My father's favorite accusation returned like a haunting refrain. He had called me ungrateful when I was 13 after shoving me against the counter for daring to ask about fairness. Now he repeated it with every text. You were always ungrateful. You never appreciated what we gave you. What they gave me was neglect and bruises, but that was not something they were willing to remember. Gaslighting was their art form. They told me Grandma would be disappointed in my greed. The same Grandma who had specifically excluded them from decision-making in her will. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They told me I was strong enough not to need the house. Strength had always been their excuse for abandonment. Vanessa is fragile, my mother insisted in one call. You've always been the strong one. Don't let property come between family. Property had never come between us. Their favoritism had. Their cruelty had. But in their world, that was not something to acknowledge. The calls turned uglier with time. One evening, my father showed up at my apartment uninvited. He pushed the door open before I could stop him, stormed into the living room, and slapped a stack of papers onto the coffee table. A realtor's contract. Sign this, he demanded, his face flushed red. This is a cash offer, more than fair market value. Do this, and we can all move on. My hands shook as I shoved the papers back. No, I said. The house is mine. His eyes narrowed into slits, and in a flash, he shoved me backwards. I stumbled over the edge of the couch, landing hard against the armrest. Pain shot through my ribs. Stop being difficult, he growled. You will not embarrass this family. He left before I could call the police, but the bruises stayed for days. I took photos. For the first time, I began building a folder not just of deeds and wills, but of evidence. If this escalated, and I knew it would, I wanted proof of every act of intimidation. My mother's approach was different. She tried to soften her voice to drip honey over the poison. Julia, sweetheart, think about your sister's future. She's meeting important people at work. She needs a house suitable for entertaining. You can't even host a dinner with your job and your tiny apartment. Be reasonable. When I refused, her mask cracked. If you don't sign, Julia, you will regret it. We will cut you off. No holidays, no birthdays, no grandchildren if you ever have them. You will be alone. I laughed bitterly into the phone. I've been alone my whole life. The only person who ever showed up for me is gone now. You don't get to use loneliness as a weapon. She hung up on me, but the message was clear. They would escalate until they broke me, or until I surrendered. Vanessa ramped up her performance as well. She left me long voicemails full of theatrical sobs. Brad and I are ready to build a life together, Julia, but we can't afford a house in this market. Don't you want me to be happy? Don't you want me to have what you never had? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. What I never had was parents who treated me equally, and her happiness had always been purchased at the cost of my suffering. Now she wanted me to hand over my inheritance like a final act of servitude. When the manipulation failed, the threats began. My father sent one final ultimatum by text the Thursday before our scheduled meeting at Attorney Collins's office. Either you agree to sell and split the proceeds, or you are no longer welcome in this family. Your choice. I stared at those words for nearly an hour. No longer welcome in this family, as if I had ever been welcome in the first place. As if my entire life had not been a litany of exclusions and forgotten milestones. The ultimatum did not frighten me. It solidified my resolve. If they wanted war, I was ready. But I also knew one truth: I could not fight them with rage alone. They had perfected the art of turning my anger into proof of my ungratefulness. If I screamed, they would say I was hysterical. If I resisted, they would claim I was cruel. If I fought, they would claim I was destroying the family. To beat them, I needed to outplay them. I needed strategy. And when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, the strategy arrived. "Julia, this is Michael Grant. I heard through professional channels you might be selling a property on Maple Street. I'm very interested. Can we talk Michael Grant?" The name detonated like dynamite in my memory. My old study partner from college, the one who had gone on to build a tech empire, the one who now happened to be CEO of the very company where Vanessa had just been promoted. I looked again at my father's ultimatum and then at Michael's message. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Michael Grant was not just anyone from my past. He was the quiet kid who used to sit beside me in the library during freshman year, both of us buried under accounting textbooks while others partied. He was the one who noticed when I pulled double shifts at the tutoring center to afford groceries and quietly slipped me his old notes so I could study faster. Back then, he was just Michael, a lanky boy with a sharp mind and a soft smile. Now he was Michael Grant, CEO of a company worth billions, and coincidentally the very company where Vanessa strutted around bragging about her recent promotion to marketing manager. The irony was delicious, but the opportunity was even better. I messaged him back quickly. "Hi, Michael. Yes, the house is available, but the sale must remain confidential. For now." His reply was immediate. "Understood. Let's meet tonight. And Julia, I remember how they treated you in college. This time you call the shots." My chest tightened at those words. All my life, my family had dictated the terms. My choices were never really mine. To hear someone with Michael's power tell me I would be the one calling the shots was intoxicating. We met that evening at a quiet cafe near the waterfront. He walked in tall, confident, wearing a suit that looked effortless, yet expensive. People turned to look at him, but when he sat across from me, his eyes softened back to the old Michael I remembered. So he began telling me about this house. I explained everything: the inheritance, my parents' pressure, Vanessa's demands, the threats, even the bruise still fading on my side from my father's shove. Michael's jaw tightened. "They put hands on you." I nodded. He exhaled slowly, fury flickering in his eyes. "Then let's make sure they never touch what's yours again." We reviewed the details like two generals planning a campaign. The property was worth $800,000, maybe more, in the current market. He offered $820 on the spot, no negotiation. "Consider it hazard pay for the hell they're putting you through," he said. "But why this house?" I asked. He smiled. "My company needs a satellite office in a residential neighborhood. It's perfect for creative work, close to downtown, but not suffocating. And," he added with a wry grin, "the fact that it happens to be your sister's dream property is just bonus." By the end of the meeting, the paperwork was drafted. Attorney Collins reviewed everything the next morning, making sure it was airtight. Within 48 hours, the deal was signed, recorded with the county irrevocable. I still remember the weight that lifted from my shoulders when Collins slid the final file across her desk. "It's done, Julia. The house is legally sold. You have nothing to fear." For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. Of course, my parents didn't know. Vanessa didn't know. They still believed they had me cornered. They still believed their threats and manipulations would eventually grind me down. And I let them believe it. I played along, agreeing to the family meeting at the attorney's office, nodding when they talked about buyers and unity. All the while, the deed sat in Michael's possession, and the trap was tightening around them. Sometimes I wondered what Grandma would say if she could see me then. Would she think I was cruel for selling her house so quickly? Or would she smile the way she used to when I outmaneuvered Vanessa in a board game? I liked to think it would be the latter. Because Grandma always told me, never let them see your next move until it's already done. By the time the meeting day arrived, I had rehearsed every expression, every measured silence. Let them shout, let them cry, let them drag their realtor into the room. I would sit calm because calm was power. Calm was control. And when the moment came, I would reveal the truth in a way that would not just protect me, but finally shatter the illusion they had built their lives on, that I was the weak one, the expendable one, the one who could be bullied into compliance. In reality, I had become something they could never control, prepared. And thanks to Michael Grant, I now had more than preparation. I had proof. Proof in ink, proof in signatures, proof filed at the county clerk's office. Proof that for once I had beaten them at their own game. The morning of the confrontation dawned gray and heavy Seattle clouds pressing down like a lid on a boiling pot. I arrived at Attorney Collins's office early, dressed in a navy suit Grandma had once helped me pick out for job interviews. It was the only thing I owned that made me feel armored. I sat in the waiting room listening to the rain tick against the windows, steadying my breath. At exactly 10 o'clock, the elevator doors opened, and in swept my parents with Vanessa between them, like royalty flanked by bodyguards. My mother's lips were pursed into that permanent line of disapproval, my father's shoulders stiff and commanding, Vanessa's eyes shimmering with rehearsed tears. Behind them trailed a woman in a bright red blazer carrying a stack of folders, the realtor, their hired executioner. Collins ushered us into the conference room, her expression already wary. The table was a massive slab of polished wood, its surface reflecting the storm brewing in my family's faces. We sat across from each other like enemies at a peace summit doomed to fail. My father wasted no time. Before we begin, he announced, ignoring Collins's attempt to open the meeting, we've brought our own real estate agent. Mrs. Patterson has buyers' ready cash offers on the table. Let's not waste time. The realtor smiled thinly, sliding papers toward me. If we list today, I can have this property sold within a week. The market is hot. Collins raised her hand. This is premature. The will has already been executed. The will can be contested. My father cut in sharply. Undue influence, mental incapacity. We've consulted lawyers. Don't think this is settled. My mother leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass. Julia, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your sister needs this home. Her new position requires her to host clients to entertain. What do you need with a 3-bedroom house? You live in a shoebox and you're fine. Vanessa sniffled on cue, pulling a tissue from her sleeve. I can't believe you're making us do this, Julia. After everything our parents have sacrificed for you, everything they've given you, you're just going to hoard Grandma's house for yourself. The words were absurd, but spoken with such conviction they nearly knocked the wind out of me. For a second, I saw the little girl inside me again, the one who believed their narrative that I was selfish for wanting scraps of attention. But then I remembered the bruise on my side, the years of neglect, the endless sacrifices demanded of me while Vanessa received the rewards. I steadied my expression, forcing my face into neutrality. Calm, I told myself. Calm is control. My father slammed his palm onto the table, rattling the glasses of water. Enough stalling. We are done waiting. Julia, you will sign this agreement today now, or you are out of this family forever. No holidays, no birthdays, no contact with grandchildren if you ever have them. Nothing. You will be erased. The silence that followed was thick. Even Aunt Susan, who had shown up uninvited to provide moral support, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Collins adjusted her glasses, clearly unsettled, but my mother seized the silence, pressing forward. Sign Julia. Be the bigger person. Do the right thing for once in your life. Vanessa dabbed her eyes again, her voice trembling with false humility. I just want fairness. Is that too much to ask? You always had Grandma's attention. Now let me have something. I almost laughed. Always had Grandma's attention, as if being noticed by one person in a world of indifference was some grand theft. But I swallowed the laugh and leaned back instead. Calm. My father leaned closer, his voice low, menacing. Stop this charade. You think you're clever. You think holding out makes you strong. You're weak, Julia. You've always been weak. That's why you hide behind books and numbers instead of living. Sign, or I'll make sure you regret every second of this defiance. My mother added the final twist of the knife. Grandma would be disappointed in you. That one almost broke me. Almost, because I could still hear Grandma's voice in my memory. They would sell your shadow if Vanessa needed the money. I took a breath, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my fingertips. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Michael's text lit the screen. Contract signed, ready when you are. Heat flooded through me like armor. I rose from my chair slowly, every eye in the room snapping toward me. Actually, I said, my voice slicing through the tension. There's something you should know. Sit down, Julia. My father barked, his command voice as sharp as when I was a child. But I didn't sit. I looked each of them in the eyes one by one and let them see something they had never truly acknowledged in me before power. The only thing you need to tell us is yes, my mother snapped. Yes, you'll sell. Yes, you'll share with your sister. Yes, you'll stop being difficult. Stop making this family suffer. Vanessa sniffled dramatically. I already told Brad we might be house shopping soon. You're embarrassing me, Julia. Just stop. Your sister has worked so hard for her promotion, Aunt Susan chimed in. She deserves a house that reflects her new status. My father sneered, his contempt dripping. You're an accountant living in a studio. What do you need with a house like that? You'll probably just rent it out to strangers, making money off Grandma's death. Disgusting. The irony nearly crushed me. Vanessa demanding my inheritance wasn't disgusting, but me keeping it was. I steadied myself. Calm. I let the silence drag until the realtor shifted uncomfortably. She pushed the papers toward me again. The offer is generous, Julia. More than fair market value. Sign today and you'll all walk away with enough for down payments elsewhere. I met her eyes cold. Each of us. The house isn't yours to divide. Don't be technical, my mother snapped. Family shares. I finally let out a soft laugh. Like you shared tuition, like you shared birthday parties, like you shared attendance at graduations. My father rolled his eyes. Here we go, poor Julia and her grudges. You got Grandma's attention, Vanessa accused, her voice suddenly sharp. Every Sunday, every holiday she was with you. You monopolized her. The least you can do is share what she left behind. Collins cleared her throat, her discomfort now obvious. The will is clear. The property was left solely to Julia. Any attempt to contest it would require evidence of undue influence, and Mrs. Anderson was evaluated by physicians before signing. She was of sound mind. My father smirked. Is it, or did Julia fill her head with stories turning her against her real family? Don't think we won't find a lawyer to argue that. My phone buzzed again. Michael en route. ETA 15 minutes. My pulse raced, but I kept my expression serene. You want the house, I said quietly. Fine. Let's go see it. You should all see what you're so desperate to take. Suspicion rippled through the room. My father narrowed his eyes. What are you playing at? No games, I replied. But if we're doing this, let's do it at the house. You should see what you're fighting for before you demand I surrender it. My mother grabbed her purse already standing. Finally some sense. Let's go. My father rose, victorious smirk plastered across his face. Vanessa clutched her tissue like a holy relic, her eyes glistening with triumph. The realtor gathered her folders eagerly. Only Collins looked uneasy. I should mention that any decisions regarding the property can't be forced today, she said. My father cut her off. We're done waiting. And just like that, the convoy formed. My parents, Vanessa and the realtor, piled into one car, probably strategizing their final assault. Aunt Susan followed in hers. Collins trailed behind in her Lexus, her lips pressed tight. And me, I drove alone. A smile tugging at the corners of my mouth, because they thought they were leading me to the gallows. In truth, they were marching straight into the trap I had already set. The convoy rolled through the damp Seattle streets like a grim parade, headlights cutting through drizzle. I drove alone, my grip steady on the wheel, while behind me my parents, Vanessa and the realtor, huddled in their car, probably rehearsing victory speeches. Collins's Lexus followed last, her expression unreadable through the rain-streaked windshield. As we turned onto Maple Street, my heart pounded. The house loomed ahead, proud and defiant with its wraparound porch and rose garden, Grandma's legacy made flesh. But what caught their eyes wasn't the house. It was the gleaming white Tesla parked in the driveway. I slowed just in time to catch the collective gasp from the car behind me. Even from my mirror, I saw Vanessa's face drain of color. She knew that car. Everyone at her office knew that car. Michael Grant's car. My father barked something I couldn't hear. My mother craned forward, suspicion etched across her face. I pulled up to the curb, stepped out, and deliberately took my time walking toward the porch. Each step felt like a drumbeat of inevitability. The front door opened before I reached it. Michael stood there tall, poised, his presence radiating effortless authority in casual but expensive clothes. And then, in the gesture that shattered everything my parents thought they knew, he bowed his head slightly to me as though acknowledging not just a friend, but an equal. "Ms. Anderson," he said with quiet respect, perfect timing. Vanessa's knees buckled. She clutched my mother's arm, whispering, "That's my CEO." My father froze mid-stride, his mouth opening but no sound coming out. My mother's face cycled between confusion and fury, her lips trembling. The realtor stepped forward, trying to recover. "Mr. Grant, what an unexpected surprise. We were just preparing to list—" "Not necessary." Michael interrupted smoothly, his eyes flicking to me. "I'm the owner." The silence that followed was electric. Rain pattered on the porch roof, neighbors peeked from their windows, and for the first time in my life, I felt the ground tilt in my favor. Collins cleared her throat, her voice calm but firm. "That's correct. The property was sold 3 days ago. The deed is filed and recorded. It is no longer Julia's to sign away." My father turned purple, his voice cracking with outrage. "Impossible! This house belonged to Julia. Belonged." Michael corrected his tone, unyielding. Past tense. The sale was finalized. $820,000 above market value. Every paper in order. Vanessa's tears transformed from performance to panic. "You sold it," she stammered. "You sold it to my boss." "Technically to his investment company," I said quietly, letting the words land like hammer blows. "All perfectly legal." My mother's shriek pierced the air. "You can't do this! We are your family!" Michael's gaze sharpened, his CEO voice emerging. "She had every right. It was her property, her decision. Family has no claim here." My father surged forward, jabbing a finger at me. "You manipulated him! This is conspiracy!" Michael laughed, not unkindly, but with cutting disbelief. "Conspiracy? I paid above asking price for a prime location. If anyone was taken advantage of, it was me. But I wanted this specific house, and I don't regret it." He glanced back at Vanessa. "We're opening a satellite office here. For your team, actually. Congratulations, Vanessa, you'll be working from this house." Vanessa made a sound between a gasp and a sob. No, that's not possible." "It's happening," Michael replied simply. "Your department head already signed off." The realtor stumbled backward, muttering something about needing to leave. My father shouted after her, "Don't you dare!" but she was already halfway to her car. My mother rounded on me, her face twisted with rage. "You vindictive little traitor! You've ruined your sister's career, your family's unity, everything." Collins stepped between us, steel in her voice. "Careful, Mrs. Anderson. Any physical aggression here will result in charges." "Charges," my father bellowed. "We'll sue. Undue influence fraud." "On what grounds?" Collins asked coolly. "That Julia sold her legal property to a willing buyer at above market value. There is no case." The neighbors were gathering now, drawn by the shouting. Mrs. Kim from next door stood on her porch phone raised to record. Mr. Peterson leaned against his fence, grinning like it was the best show he'd seen in years. I met my parents' furious stares and felt something inside me crystallize. All the years of gaslighting, of neglect, of being forced into silence, it ended here. Michael bowed his head again slightly toward me, a gesture so small yet monumental. It said, without words, "She is not weak. She is not alone. She is respected." And in front of the people who had always dismissed me, that gesture was more powerful than any scream. My father's voice broke into a roar. "You're done, Julia. Do you hear me? You're out of this family." I looked at him steadily, my voice calm, razor sharp. "Promise." The silence after my single word promise hung in the damp Seattle air like a final verdict. My father's face turned scarlet, veins standing out on his temple. My mother's hands shook with barely contained fury, and Vanessa's eyes brimmed with tears that were no longer staged, but raw, panicked. Around us, the crowd of neighbors' thickened phones lifted whispers rippling. This wasn't a private family negotiation anymore. It was a public unraveling. Michael's voice cut through measured and commanding. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, you are trespassing on private property. Unless Ms. Anderson," he glanced at me pointedly, "invites you inside, you need to leave." My father barked a bitter laugh. "You think you can order me off my own daughter's property?" "Correction," Collins interjected, stepping forward with a file. "This is no longer Julia's property. It belongs to Mr. Grant's company. And as counsel, I can confirm every document is legally binding. You have no authority here." She laid the paperwork on the hood of her Lexus like evidence in a courtroom. My mother's voice rose in a shriek. "This is betrayal. Your grandmother would be ashamed." "That's not what she told me," Collins said evenly. "She specifically instructed that Julia be the sole beneficiary. She said, and I quote, 'Linda and Robert will try to take this from Julia. Don't let them.'" The words detonated like a bomb. My mother staggered back as if struck. Gasps rose from the neighbors, and for the first time in years, I saw doubt flicker in Vanessa's expression. She really said that," Vanessa whispered. Collins nodded. "Your grandmother wanted to protect Julia because she understood exactly how this would play out." The street went dead quiet except for the steady rain and the soft hum of Michael's Tesla. My father tried to recover voice shaking with rage. "Even if this sale stands, even if the house is gone, we'll ruin you, Julia. You'll have no family, no support, nothing." I turned to face him fully, my voice calm but unflinching. I never had those things to begin with. All I had was Grandma. And now I have something stronger proof. I gestured to Collins's files, to Michael standing like a shield beside me, to the neighbors filming every second. "Proof that you don't control me anymore." Vanessa crumbled, then clutching her head with both hands. "You don't understand, Julia. This house was supposed to be my future, my chance to show the company I belonged. Now," she looked at Michael, her voice breaking, "now I'll be humiliated." Michael's tone was neutral but carried weight. "Your career depends on your work. Vanessa, not your family's ability to hand you status symbols. You'll report here Monday at 9 a.m. sharp. If you can't handle the assignment, HR will discuss alternatives." The unspoken word termination hung in the air like thunder. Vanessa swayed as if the ground had dropped beneath her. My mother grabbed her arm, glaring daggers at me. "You've destroyed your sister's life. Are you happy now?" I met her gaze steadily. "I didn't destroy anything. I defended what was mine. If Vanessa's life collapses because she can't work without stealing from me, that's not my doing. That's hers." The neighbors murmured approval, some nodding, others outright clapping. Mr. Peterson called out, "About time someone stood up to you." My father whipped around, snarling at the onlookers. "This is private family business," Mrs. Kim retorted from her porch. "Not when you're screaming on our street for 20 years. We all saw how you treated Julia." My mother's face blanched, her power unraveling under the weight of public exposure. Michael took a step closer to me and in a small but deliberate act bowed his head once more. The gesture silenced the murmurs, reframed the entire scene. To my parents, it was unbearable seeing a man of wealth and influence defer to me, the daughter they had branded weak, selfish, disposable. My father lunged forward suddenly, his fist clenched as if to strike. Gasps erupted. I froze, but Michael moved faster, stepping between us, his voice steel. "Touch her, and you'll be in handcuffs before you finish the swing." And as if on cue, a police cruiser turned, the corner lights flashing but sirens off. Collins had called them preemptively. The cruiser rolled to a stop, 2 officers stepping out calm but watchful. "Problem here?" one asked. Collins gestured. "These individuals are trespassing. The property belongs to my client." The officers looked at my father. "Sir, you need to leave." My father sputtered, his fury collapsing into impotence. My mother hissed under her breath. Vanessa wept openly now, mascara streaking. Slowly they backed toward their car, every step captured on neighbors' phones, every ounce of their control stripped. My father pointed a trembling finger at me before climbing in. "This isn't over, Julia. You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "The only thing I regret is taking this long to stop you." The car door slammed, the engine roared, and just like that, they were gone. Their departure punctuated by the rain and the neighbors' scattered applause. Michael exhaled beside me, his hand brushing my shoulder in solidarity. "You handled that perfectly," he murmured. I nodded, though inside I was trembling. Not from fear, but from the release of decades of pressure. For the first time in my life, I had stood up in full daylight, witnesses all around, and refused to bend. And the world hadn't ended. It had opened. Collins gathered her files, her expression softer than usual. "Your grandmother would be proud, Julia. Very proud." I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked back at the house, at the roses blooming defiantly in the rain. For years, my family had called me selfish, ungrateful, weak. Today, I proved them wrong. But more than that, I proved it to myself. The days after the confrontation felt unreal, as though I had stepped out of a storm into air so still it almost rang in my ears. For the first time in my life, there were no midnight texts demanding my obedience, no surprise knocks on my door with threats disguised as parental concern, no phone calls filled with guilt and gaslighting. Silence replaced their control, and in that silence, I finally began to breathe. But the quiet didn't mean the drama was over. It meant the consequences had begun. Word of what happened on Maple Street spread faster than rainwater downhill. By that evening, clips of the confrontation were circulating online thanks to neighbors who had recorded everything. My father's red-faced shouting, my mother's shrieks. Vanessa's meltdown, it was all there, spliced with Collins's calm legal statements and Michael's poised defense of me. By morning, coworkers at my firm were whispering in the break room. "Did you see that video, Julia Anderson? That was her family." Far from pity. I felt respect in their eyes. For once, I wasn't the quiet accountant nobody noticed. I was the woman who had stood against her entire family and won. My parents, however, spiraled into outrage. My mother posted a Facebook rant dripping with melodrama. When money matters more than family, some daughters are just born cruel. Aunts and uncles chimed in, but this time the narrative cracked. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years sent me private messages saying, "We always knew they treated you badly. Good for you." One even wrote, "Your grandma would be smiling." That message I printed out and tucked into the folder where I kept all the evidence, a reminder that the truth had reached at least some corners of my fractured family tree. Vanessa's fallout was harsher. On Monday morning, she arrived at the house for her new assignment, shoulders hunched, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Michael's satellite office team had already moved furniture into the downstairs rooms. Sleek desks, monitors, and whiteboards filled the spaces where Grandma once served tea. I watched from the upstairs window as Vanessa lingered in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel like she could will herself invisible. At exactly 8:59, she stumbled out, smoothed her hair, and walked to the front door with robotic steps. When she glanced up and saw me watching from the bay window, I lifted my coffee mug in a small salute. Her face twisted, and she turned away quickly. That first week was brutal for her. Through the old house vents, I overheard snippets of meetings, Michael insisting on higher standards, her department head correcting sloppy proposals, coworkers frustrated by her lack of preparation. Without my parents cushioning her failures, Vanessa floundered. On Thursday, I overheard her crying in the downstairs bathroom, whispering into her phone. It's not fair, she ruined everything. But no amount of whining could change the reality she had to work, really work, for the first time in her life. Meanwhile, my parents escalated in different ways. My father tried to push Collins with threats of lawsuits. She replied with a single letter listing every statute and precedent that rendered their claims void. He stopped calling after that. My mother doubled down on guilt. She left me voicemails dripping with venom disguised as sorrow. "Julia, your sister is crumbling. Do you really want that on your conscience? She's fragile. You've always been the strong one. Stop punishing us." I saved every message, not because they hurt me anymore, but because they reminded me of the game they always played, twisting my resilience into a weapon against me. The difference now was that I didn't believe it. And when neighbors like Mrs. Kim stopped by with tea and a knowing smile, I realized I wasn't alone. The community around Grandma's house became my support. People told me stories about how she had bragged about me, how she'd made them promise to look out for me. She always knew you'd have to fight them, Mrs. Kim said. Now you finally have. As the weeks passed, Vanessa's facade cracked further. She lost the luxury apartment when my parents could no longer afford to subsidize her lifestyle. She traded the designer car for an older model, swapped boutique dresses for clearance racks. Around the office, word spread she was on a performance improvement plan. I overheard her department head telling Michael she's never learned discipline. Without family connections to prop her up, she's drowning. Michael's response was clinical but final. Then she'll sink unless she learns. For once, there was no safety net. My parents stopped calling as often. Perhaps they were busy spinning lies for relatives who no longer believed them. Perhaps they were simply ashamed. Either way, their absence felt less like abandonment and more like freedom. I spent my evenings tending Grandma's roses, sipping coffee on her porch, or reading in the chair where she had once read to me. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like mine. And each night, when the office downstairs went dark and Vanessa slunk away, I felt the shift of power settle like a long, overdue correction. For the first time in nearly 30 years, I was not the scapegoat, not the doormat, not the expendable child. I was Julia Anderson, the woman who stood her ground and finally won. 6 months after the confrontation, the Anderson family no longer looked like the fortress that once towered over me. It looked fractured, faded, diminished by the weight of their own choices. My parents sold their suburban house and moved to Arizona to start fresh, according to the Christmas card they sent out. The subtext was clearer. They needed to escape a neighborhood that had watched them publicly humiliate themselves on Maple Street. They left without a goodbye, without an attempt at reconciliation. Only bitter silence and a last jab in my mother's handwriting. Some daughters are crueler than strangers. I didn't reply. Vanessa's decline was harder to watch. Without my parents' financial support, she lost the apartment, the clothes, the social life she had built on their money. Michael eventually let her go after a string of missed deadlines and sloppy work. The day she was terminated, I overheard her telling a coworker through the vents, "It's not fair. She got everything." The coworker replied bluntly, "She inherited it. You tried to take it. There's a difference." That truth seemed to wound her more than the job loss itself. After that, Vanessa disappeared from the office and from my daily line of sight. Sometimes I caught glimpses of her around the neighborhood, thinner, tired, her once perfect hair, limp, her eyes avoiding mine. I felt no triumph in it, only a quiet, settled clarity. Consequences were not my cruelty. They were the harvest of her own choices. My life, by contrast, steadied and blossomed. With no rent draining my account, with consulting work flowing steadily thanks to Michael's referrals, I saved more in 6 months than I had in the previous 3 years. I invested carefully, remembering Grandma's mantra, contracts are stronger than promises. Each morning, I woke to the scent of roses outside my window, brewed coffee in the kitchen where she once stood humming, and walked through the garden she had planted with her bare hands. It was not just a house anymore. It was sanctuary, fortress inheritance of love wrapped in brick and mortar. One spring afternoon, Mrs. Kim stopped by with tea and a stack of old photographs Grandma had left with her. "She wanted you to have these," Mrs. Kim explained. I flipped through images of birthdays, garden parties, holidays where I had always been smiling in the background, unnoticed by my parents, but always with Grandma's arm around me. In one photo, she had written on the back, "Julia deserves more than they will ever give. Someday, she will see it herself." I placed that photo on my desk upstairs as a reminder that my grandmother's faith had always been the seed. I had simply grown into it. Michael visited occasionally, checking on the property, sipping coffee with me on the porch. One evening, as the sun painted the sky pink and gold, he said quietly, "You know your grandmother was right. The best revenge really is contractual." We laughed, but there was truth in it. Rage can burn fast, but a signature filed at the county lasts forever. Still, I didn't live in revenge. I lived in restoration. Therapy helped me untangle decades of gaslighting, helped me see that I was not broken, only bound for too long by their chains. With each session, I shed another layer of guilt that had never been mine to carry. In the quiet of my new life, I also began writing journals, essays, pieces about family estrangement and self respect. Sharing them anonymously online, I was startled by how many people resonated. Messages poured in. This is my story too. Thank you for putting into words what I couldn't. For the first time, my pain served a purpose beyond survival. It became connection. A year later, on the anniversary of the sale, I stood in the garden at sunset planting bulbs just as Grandma had taught me. My hands were dirty, the air was cool, and the roses glowed faintly in the fading light. I whispered aloud, "We did it, Grandma. We kept it safe." The wind stirred the leaves as if answering. That night, I opened a final box of her things I had kept untouched. Inside were letters dozens addressed to me, written over the years, but never given. I read one slowly, tears sliding down my cheeks. My dearest Julia, I see the fire in you they try to extinguish. One day you will not only protect what is yours, you will thrive because of it. When that day comes, don't let guilt steal your joy. Stand tall, my brilliant girl. I folded it carefully and placed it with the photo. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the overlooked daughter. I felt like the rightful heir to strength, to dignity, to a future that was mine alone. My parents may never understand. Vanessa may never forgive. But their forgiveness was never the point. The point was that I learned to forgive myself for believing their lies. And in that forgiveness, I finally healed. So if you ask me what I gained, it wasn't just a house or money. I gained freedom. I gained voice. I gained the understanding that family is not who demands sacrifice, but who celebrates your survival. And above all, I gained peace, the kind that blooms in a garden tended with patience, watered by truth, and protected by contracts no one can tear apart.